My name is Janne Kallio. I'm here to help you to understand what the training load means, how do we measure it, what is the key things to understand in order to have a progressive training in order to achieve your next performance goals. We start on our training model. What does it mean in context of overall training and where the training load is. So basically, when we think about the Suunto training model, how we illustrate training, that it starts from the point that okay, overall you try to increase training load in longer period of time doing consistent work. Then in this balance you start to look at okay, am I able to recover from all the work, and then how do you fit this in your active life. And then overall you of course try to figure out how do I do this tomorrow, next week, and so on, in order to then able to get some type of progress in your performance. And then in the end you might want to go and do a race, so which is basically a special time of the year that okay, now today I want to achieve something. Now when we talk about training load, the basic principle is that in order to achieve something special, you do effort long time consistently. So here is an illustration where we see an x-axis weeks and y-axis you see the training load. And when we start to map the thinking, the idea there is that over the longer period of time you do a bit more effort each week, and then here mapping a training weeks as a color-coded bubbles where the training stress, so-called training load, is illustrated. Now when it's progressive you can see it's like a green colored, but then there are statuses where you might be overreaching, so it means that the recent training load is too much. You are doing too much work compared to what you are used to. And then other side of course the coin is that do I do too little effort? Is it really increasing my adaptation? Is it under training? So just resting too much might of course you might be ending losing fitness. And now this principle of course is in any kind of training, because we are trying to stress the body in order to get some gains, and this training load has been of course in history being quantified in different manners. So some athletes are just counting hours of exercise, some look at just weekly running kilometers, some trail runners might look at the vertical meters each week. Simplistic perhaps would be how many times do I train in a week. I do three workouts a week, that's my training load. But then the features that many wearables are using as Suunto as well, so are trying to look at also intensity of the exercise and then a duration in order to understand the so-called training impulse, where it means that we quantify the load as a training stress core, which then can be derived in a longer term as well, like acute and chronic training loads. And then of course we need to remember that nowadays when you think about watches like Suunto, we can measure easily heart rate and pace and power values to understand a bit of what type of efforts you do. But for example, if you do a lot of strength training, the products don't really measure the load that your muscles are getting, or then a stress that, for example, neuromuscular stress might be from some sprint training or team sports and so on. So there's of course aspects that are lacking in order to understand every type of training with this type of load metrics. But especially when you are doing endurance sport or getting general fitness, nowadays the wearables are able to quite nicely illustrate what type of training you do in long term, in big picture. And then of course it's a good question that how does this relate to other aspects of training, like training load. I would like to here refer a very nice illustration by Steven Sider, which is a researcher in Norway who many years ago already illustrated in this type of hierarchy of training, where the idea is that if you want to do some proper progressive training, make sure that the foundation is strong. So basically that you have enough training volume, frequency, intensity there. And then when you start to worry about topics like what's my index distribution or how do I periodize my training, it has less impact in your performance if you haven't really done enough work on the lower part. So again, when we talk about training load, it's basically a combination of training volume, frequency, and intensity, which we basically are covering today's session. The training load here, one way to illustrate the impact is, as mentioned, was with some athletes is just covering the distance. This was a example published a while ago about impact of volume to performance. And what you can see here is a runners with the weekly running distance, and then the pace that they were able to do certain race distances. So basically here you can see that the green line, for example, is a 10-kilometer race distance, and you can see that depending on the weekly running volume, the race pace is getting faster and faster when the normal weekly volume has been increasing. So basically the story here is that when you are increasing the training volume, you most probably will get benefits in your performance. There's no way around that. Now, obviously, when the volume starts to be very, very high, so in this case we start to talk about already, for example, distances over 100 kilometers a week, which is a lot, then you start to, the correlation for the race pace is not that evident anymore. So with the enough volume, you start to also highlight other aspects. And of course, many of our normal people who are training, we don't do that much of volume. So many times, if you just want to get a bit faster, understand if you are able to increase when you are preparing for your first half marathon or whatnot, that you are able to increase a bit of the gradually the training volume by increasing the running distance or running time, for example. Now with Suunto, we try to illustrate this data also in Suunto mobile application. Here is the in different sport groups. So in running, trail running, treadmill, we combine this as a duration, which you have been able to do this week also with the training load metrics with the distances and ascent, and then we convert this to 6-week average. So has this week now, have you already reached the volumes that you are usually doing? So that's a nice way to provide a personal feedback if you have been doing enough compared to what you are used to. And usually these kind of aspects for training volumes and loads and so on, it only makes sense to compare yourself, not with other people. So because many of these methods are also based on your personal parameters and personal calculations. So always follow what you are doing yourself. And now when we talk about training load calculation, not just about the volume itself, we can take intensity in this equation. So basically model here is that when we look at the intensity, which is in y-axis here, and the duration in x-axis, we can say that there's a correlation that, okay, when the duration increases, the load increases, when the intensity increases, the load increases. Simple thinking, and then when we start to put different intensity levels there, so if you do a short duration, low intensity, that's like a recovery topic, and then when you perhaps the intensity a bit higher, you start to be working aerobically, perhaps a bit longer, even the load increases when the intensity increases, and then similar way as you go higher and higher in this intensity ladder, the load also increases. And same time, when you do a 30-minute aerobic run, if you start to continue the same intensity for 1 hour or 2 hours, obviously the training load will also increase. So in practice, the thinking here, of course, is that with a lower intensity with longer duration, the load also starts to then get bigger. Now, when we think about the Suunto training load calculation, training load metrics, we basically use a method that has been successfully launched by Training Peaks several years ago. The basic principle is coming from Training Impulse, TRIMP metrics, which is a findings already decades ago. The idea there is that depending on the duration and intensity, we basically provide an impact number. So in Suunto case, now we use the training stress score value, and there the idea is that if you train for 1 hour around anaerobic threshold, that equals 100 TSS points. So the load is like 100 TSS. So it's just a quantification. It's quite simple to understand when you know just a basic model. So for example, let's say that you do a 30-minute easy swim. The TSS score could be from 20. Then when you do a 30-minute hard run, like fast pace around anaerobic threshold, your TSS score could be 50. But if you do a 2-hour Zone 2 ride, it can be 100. So again, with the intensity and duration, you start to get, with the bigger intensity, bigger duration, you start to get bigger load. So for example, if you have 4-hour ride with variable intensity, the TSS score could be, for example, 200. So again, it illustrates with one number what type of load you are getting, which is easier to remember than just thinking of different aspects of the durations and intensity every single time. Now on the intensity, when we talk about training load calculation, those ladders, Suunto maps the intensities in 5 different zones. So basically the recovery, aerobic, anaerobic, VO2 max, and these 5 zones we then look at the zone 4 to 5 limit as being the so-called anaerobic threshold. So basically it's good to understand that there's different zone methodologies which you might follow, but in Suunto, when it comes to training load, we look at what is your zone 4 to 5 limit, which we believe that that's the anaerobic threshold, because that's the one that we will then use in training stress calculation. Now anaerobic threshold, basically again when we look at the load calculation, we take a percentage from anaerobic threshold and use that number to calculate the load. So for example, if you are 100% in threshold, it means that you will get in 1 hour that 100 TSS points. So it's a percentage from anaerobic threshold which will impact what type of load value you get during a certain period of time. So basically here we can see that anaerobic threshold load increases based on the duration, and of course then the question is that where do I actually set this up? So we have today in Suunto products a possibility to define a anaerobic threshold, so the zone 4 to 5 limit with pace, power, heart rate, and you can do this even in different sports. So for example, running and cycling as separate, because again when you look for example heart rate, the anaerobic threshold is in a different level in each sport. Then again, when you use for example pace and power, obviously same thing. So you can have a zones defined by power or zones defined by pace, and then the zone 4 or 5 to limit, for example as power or pace, is the threshold. Then when we think about the calculation model with training loads, we will calculate the training stress score based on this pace, power, heart rate. Different sports have different defaults. So For example, if you're using power in cycling, that will be the one that are the calculations based on. But then, for example, when you do swimming, we use the swim pace as an intensity metric, and then we look at your historical swim paces to understand, is this now how hard swim session for you, in order to have a best possible quantification of the load from the swimming sessions. Also, we try to ensure that every workout that you do has a training load metric, even those ones that hasn't measured heart rate or pace or power. So we will look at the activity type. So have you played tennis or have you been running? And then we will assign a TSS score based on duration for that. So if you do a running for 2 hours, you will get higher TSS score than playing tennis for 2 hours. So that's the reason there is that we want to ensure that there is overall training has every workout has a load number, because then it's easier to provide a guidance how to train properly. In order to get the best possible metrics, please use the heart rate, pace and power values, and set up your zones accordingly in the Suunto watch. Once these training stress scores are calculated for every single workout, then we evaluate your training based on these numbers. So, for example, if you have been training constantly for several weeks, we are using value called chronic training load. This chronic training load looks at what's your normal training load each day during the last 6 weeks. So it's a quite simple metric to understand what are you used to do. So constant work for several weeks leads into fitness, and the chronic training load has been referred as a fitness metric. So what kind of fitness do you currently have? And it's just basic simple that the correlation between how much effort you do correlates how fit you are. So quite simple metric in that sense. And the calculation works in a way that this illustrates the weekly training load bubbles, the training stress for each week, and then when we take a weighted average during the 6 weeks, that's the chronic training load value. And then if you want to understand a bit more how much this has changed during the last 6 weeks, we compare the value what you currently have to the value that was 6 weeks ago, and this is called so-called ramp rate. So how much you have changed your fitness during the last 6 weeks. So it of course might mean that the CTL number, this chronic training load number, has been going up and down during that 6 weeks, but the comparison is basically where were you and where are you today. And then of course the ramp rates might be higher or smaller depending of the rate of chronic load increase. The chronic load is again personal. It depends how much you do effort, and it's best to compare yourself. If you have been increasing or decreasing, you bit know how much you might expect some fitness changes. But then there's always question, okay, if I'm a professional athlete, what should the CTL be? What if I'm just starting to exercise a bit more? What would be a good number? And here's some examples, like if you, for example, are a professional athlete working out continuously with huge volumes, the chronic load could be over 150. For athletes who are focusing on good performance level, working a lot, training a lot each week, training 10-15 hours a week, might see a number like 100 to 150 as a chronic load. And then there's active athletes who are training ongoing manner, but perhaps have some easy weeks, some easy days here and there, probably 70 to 100. And then most of the normal fitness enthusiasts that do a lot of training sessions, have fun in workouts, do a 4, 5, 6 hours a week, they probably have numbers like 50 to 70, and then recreational people commonly see like 20 to 40 40 numbers, and of course there's levels below this as well. Again, it's just like a guidance and ballpark. It's not really a measurement that can I now run a marathon under 5 hours or 3 hours. It's more about your personal fitness change. With the chronic training load, we also look at the shorter time period. It's called acute training load. Acute training load basically tells you what have you done lately. So it's basically last 7 days effort. So what you have recently been training. And then of course when we try to illustrate this as a graph, again this is a weekly volume, weekly training stress scores illustrated as a green bubbles. And then when we take the average from the last 7 days, it's illustrated as a line, and there you are today. So that's my training load in last 7 days. And when we then go to the next one, which is training stress balance, it's basically a story. What is the acute training load and what is the chronic training load difference? So in principle, are you now doing more or less than what you are used to? Again, it's a personal parameter. It's basically trying to give you a pretty indication of with simple numbers, now I'm training too much or I'm training too little. As we started, what is the optimal range of increasing the load progressively? So basically same graph again. Now we first draw here the chronic training load, so the last 6 weeks efforts, and then we look at the last 7 days. So now the question is, what is my training stress balance? Am I ready to train more or less? And now when the training load lately has been bigger than what I'm used to, that means that the training stress balance is negative, because those are taken into account both. And it means that when it's negative, you feel tired. And bigger negative number means that more tired you are. And in the same way, if the acute training load would be lower, it means that training stress balance is positive. So you are, from training perspective, you seem to be recovered. So you probably would be able to do more efforts than what you have lately done. There's of course other factors that impact this kind of thinking, are you recovered or not, which we will talk later on the episodes regarding heart rate variabilities, regarding feeling, measurements and so on. But when we just talk about training, progressive training, the training stress TSB value is a quite nice indication of where you are in your training. And then again, when we think about, okay, what does this actually mean as a number? So if you are very much positive side, like plus 15 and so on, that's basically losing fitness. You are not really training that much compared to what you're used to. So probably can do a lot more. Keeping fit, plus minus 10-15. That's a normal training. It fluctuates anyway. You train some days a bit more, some days a bit less. So it's up and there. And then the progressive load it's clearly negative. Minus 10, minus 30 around, and you keep continue doing more efforts. Which of course then is a question when it's too much, and then when we start to be in a minus 20, minus 30, even more, then there start to be potential for injury, potential risk of injury. So of course you would need to back up a bit. And then when you think about this as if you would do every training the same intensity, simple example would be that you have been normally training 5 hours a week, and now you suddenly have started training 8-9 hours a week, like double volume. Okay, you would be in minus 40-50 range. So that's a simple example to understand that, okay, increasing intensity or duration in a rapid manner is not that wise, so do it progressively. I will give you an example of how this could look like when you are training in a longer period of time. This is my personal example. One 1.5 years illustrated from Suunto mobile application. This is our progress chart, where you can see a red line as an acute training load, so that weekly changes every 7 days. Then you can see the chronic load with a black line illustrating that how my fitness, how my chronic load is going. So every rolling 6-week values. And then the training stress balance that illustrates the difference between these two. Am I doing too much, or am I in a right place in my training progress? And then when we look at this graph a bit more in detail, this is a first part of the screen shows start of the year, where you can see training increasing step by step, where the chronic load is gradually, very slightly increasing week by week, and then you can see that the training stress balance is there, sometimes a bit negative, sometimes even positive, and then when you look at a end of this season, there's an Ironman Finland race, much bigger load there, but not huge preparation for that race. And after this, you can see the off season, so chronic load decreases, the training load is very low for a couple of months, and fitness in a sense is lost, and the new beginning starts to be in autumn side, and you can see again a very nice increase until spring, from the autumn to spring, and you can see that also the training stress balance is there in mostly negative, and this kind of very gradual increase is quite safe way to train, and you start keep eye on the ball, where the summer season starts with some few races, but the load is actually a bit easier there compared to the latest months in spring, and then just where the last couple of months before World Championships are here, you can see that there's a deep fatigue, so you are very tired on this time, and the training load is pretty high, and then the race, which was basically then prepared for the whole season, shown accordingly. So this is an example how the training load metrics in long term can be looked at, and basically you can have this in Suunto mobile application. All the variables that we went through, TSPs, CTLs, the weekly training stress scores are also shown in Suunto watches. So, and of course we are also connected with Training Peaks, which is the leader of this training stress score metrics, where you can also evaluate the data, obviously on the Training Peaks platform. That was today's story about training load. I hope you learned a bit more, and I'll see you next time on the topic about training intensity. See you. Bye bye.